Second story. My Skinwalker story. Arizona. Okay, so to start out, I live in Mesa, Arizona, which is basically Phoenix, Arizona, because the main cities of Arizona spread out into many sites with no border in between. Mesa is what I would call the suburbs of Phoenix. I changed my name, of course. I live in an apartment complex I would describe as close to the ghetto but still nice. I live in a bedroom, one bathroom apartment inn with my girlfriend. Arizona is a state full of ancient Native American history. I live next to a Hohokam Canal, as do many Arizonians. The whole place used to be cities of ancient Native Americans. The point is, I'm in the area for what I believe to be a skinwalker. I'll get to my story. Yesterday, I was drinking one of the things I picked up during the COVID-19 quarantine, or what's enforced here, and I decided to smoke a bowl on my apartment patio, which I don't usually do, mind you. I just finished loading up my pipe and taking the first hit when I hear a voice somewhere nearby. "Amanda, open the door, please." It was a young, probably in the 20s girl's voice talking, and it sounded calm and teasing. It continued on as I tried to ignore it, smoking my last bud. After about 4 times of it repeating itself, my curiosity caused me to look for the source. I saw in an apartment building facing across from me movement. I saw a dog standing on its hind legs, leaning on a door, tapping. At first I shrugged, of course. Then I hear the voice again. It sounded exactly the same as last time. Exactly the same. As if you record their voice and that sentence and replayed it once again. There wasn't any other sound or movement in the complex. I watched the thing knock on Amanda's door for like 30 seconds in what I would call a state of shock and curiosity. Then it stopped and didn't move for another 20 seconds, until the dog thing stood all the way up, away from the doorway, on its hind legs, and turned to face me. It made eye contact with me, which is weird because we were at least 50 yards away. I'm on the 3rd floor, it's on the 2nd, but I felt it looking at me. I held its eye contact. I was so scared. I felt like I should run. Then it got on all 4s and headed down the stairs slowly. At the bottom, it started slowly walking over to me. I was on all 4s now, about to go inside or scream, I don't know. But I had to know what this thing was going to do. It walked close to my balcony. Yes, it was a dog, a brownish yellow, dirty-looking thing, with big eyes that were 100% attentive to mine. It didn't seem natural, to be honest, but nothing looked wrong at a glance, except that it was staring into my eyes and wouldn't stop. I ran inside as it reached the bottom of my stairs and locked my doors. Soon I heard clawing at my door, doggy clawing. Next I heard the door handle jiggle, then it started on my porch door. I, of course, never answered. Instead, I hid behind my kitchen counter with a knife. After about 30 minutes it left. I stayed up all night, but I didn't see it again, and I didn't go out again. I'm hoping it doesn't come back. I haven't gone outside at night again. I'm burning sage and trying to be careful as I can. Third story. Smiling Skinwalker. I've had a draft of this story set up for a while, but I've been too worried and scared to tell. It made me question everything. My faith, my eyes, my sanity. I've decided it's time to finally let others know about what I've experienced, as it may help me move on. At least that's what I hope. I recently moved westward to Arizona from the boring state of Oklahoma. I am a devout Christian, and never once before this had I believed there were entities in existence that we couldn't hunt down with our modern advancements. It's 2019, for heaven's sake. You'd figure if we wanted to find something, we would, and most of all, we could. It was the 23rd of December, 2018. I was in Payson, Arizona, a bit north of Phoenix. My friends and I, in our Christmas spirit, decided to head out north of town, about 5 to 6 miles or so into the forest on a secluded trail. It was cold that night. Some of my friends shivered and displayed obvious signs of unpreparedness. I was layered fairly well, and yet the winds and frigid cold punctured through my layers and onto me. We wanted to make a bonfire, warm up, enjoy ourselves, and a few drinks. I knew as soon as I got into the car to head that way, something was off. I felt sick, uneasy, and something in my gut told me to just stay home. But I couldn't put my finger on just what, and ignored my ever-so-looming feelings of anxiety. We picked up friends and headed to the trail. I'm a huge nature lover and always felt safe in the confines of the forest. I felt in control, at ease. But not tonight. It may sound cliché, but I'll be damned if it didn't feel like someone or something was watching me when we finally got there. And when I had gotten far enough down the trail that turning back would be no hasty endeavor, it finally hit me why I felt so eerie. That same year, during the weeks prior to Thanksgiving, I was here before. It's not a spot we usually go to, therefore I was not familiar with it, nor were my friends. We were coming out for the same reason we were in December, for a few drinks around a bonfire. It was late. I, however, hadn't had any spirits that night. It was my job to gather firewood. I didn't mind. My chance to survey and explore the area around us wouldn't be bad. Before I even left our area, things took a turn for the strange. I was at the edge of the light being cast from the small bonfire I was to gather more fuel for. In the faint glow of the far trees, I caught a glimpse of something dart behind a tall pine. I asked backwards to my friends if it was out of the ordinary for people to be hanging around this spot. My query was only met with silence from them as they drank on. I took a few more steps beyond the comfort of the blaze, keeping my eyes affixed on the tall, shadowy figure fixated behind the tall trees. I could faintly make out that it had moved in a slight bobbing motion, like a buoy upon a tide. My immediate thoughts drew a blank as to why someone would be out here doing this. Maybe I was seeing things, or it was a prank of some sort. I opened my mouth to call out, or even crack a joke, but was mortified when I realized I could not speak. Something inside of me prevented me of making any noise. My heart raced. As it swiftly came, it shot off into the distance like a bullet. Being startled so badly, I fell back onto the ground and kicked myself back like a spooked animal, scratching and cutting my hands as I do so. My friends saw me and laughed, thinking I was drunk. I managed to stammer out a line to what I saw, but was only met with a few blank stares and laughs, making me sound stupid. For the rest of the night, I never dared step away from the beams of the bonfire. As I walked down that trail that frigid December evening, I remember what I had seen and felt on that cold November night, and my stomach dropped. My friends were slurring out Christmas carols and other drunk epiphanies. I know they wouldn't listen to me even if I spoke out, so I ignored the guttural feelings, prayed for the best, and walked on. I hadn't been drinking much this night either. I don't enjoy alcohol as much as my friends, and often I was the one responsible for herding them home when the night was over. However, to calm my tense nerves, I had a drink or two from some Jaeger we had chilled in the ice chest. It was Christmas after all. It worked. We were all having a good time, enjoying our festive feelings and generally savoring the crisp forest atmosphere. Soon, nature called, and forgetting my prior ordeal, I began to walk away from the fire to relieve myself. I walked a fair 300 or so feet away towards a big rock resting behind some fallen trees, not wanting to be seen doing my business. I was not even far enough away from the fire to not be able to hear my friends' voices echoing through the woodlands. From behind me, my friend Corbin, who had come along, called out my name. I'll admit I was tipsy, but nowhere near enough to not differentiate reality from a drunken stupor. I remember calling out to him, telling him to give me a moment to finish. I zipped up and turned to walk around the rock to where I heard him wonder too. I don't know what it was, but sure as all heaven above and hell below was not Corbin. It took me a minute for my woozy mind to put this together and stop walking towards it. I am thankful I did. This being stood tall, at least 6 to 7 feet. Its eyes burned like our fire. It moved from a dog-like four-limb position to standing tall. The light from the moon on this cold night radiated the body, showing off its dark, slender shape with an inhumane sheen. I began to sob, violently. My mind ran in panicked circles. Seconds felt like lifetimes as my world ground to a halt at the clawed feet of the beast that I was sure was going to take my life from me right then and there. I did the only thing I could think to do. I dropped to my knees and began to pray. This monster to my petrified brain had to have been the devil himself. To imagine him anything worse than it would be impossible. It did not like my pleas to God. An unholy shriek of what I can only think to describe as someone screaming loudly with lungs full of water rang out. I screamed in terror and with all the strength I could muster, lunged backwards across the forest floor, running as fast as my legs could take me. I fell a few times, I think, in sheer panic. I just couldn't manage to get my body to work properly knowing that thing was near. When I returned in a panicked craze to the fire, covered in sweat, dirt, and tears, I managed to wheeze out what happened somewhat through my sobs of fear. I could tell they doubted whether or not what I was desperately stammering out was real or not. I think I was so horrified in that moment that I had a small seizure, because everything else is a blur. I remember going to the truck, leaving. I remember waking up the next day receiving a multitude of texts saying I was either stupid and crazy, or texts from worried friends asking if I was okay. And I also remember the last I saw of the thing before I made my frenzied flee, when it smiled back at me through the forest and skittered off into the darkness. A few days after Christmas, I was able to get in touch with a native elder here in town. I was so scared mentioning the event because I was worried of being mocked or him not believing me. To a twist of my thinking, I told him very vividly what I had encountered. He wholeheartedly believed and told me it was a skinwalker. He then blessed me thoroughly and told me to leave that stretch of land alone and to never venture out there again. Next time I might not be so lucky. He didn't have to tell me twice. I know I sound crazy. If I were you, I wouldn't believe me either. But you don't have to. All you have to know is, for the love of God above and all things holy, never forget that we are not alone on this earth. Sometimes during the night, whenever I look out my window, I catch sight of eyes in the trees looking back at me. I will keep this thread updated. I am still horrified. Fourth story. You all need to chill about skinwalkers. I've been lurking around this subreddit for a while now, reading some of the biggest hits and the like. This is the first time I've actually made an account. First of all, let me thank each and every one of you for making me feel less alone. I've seen and done some crazy things in my life, and I'm not proud of some of them. Reading all of your stories makes me feel more normal. Now that's over. You all need to chill about the skinwalkers. I mean, the second you see someone talk about their experiences in a forest, you all run around screaming, "Skinwalker," like it's the end of the whole world and they're definitely going to die. And you do that regardless of where they are geographically, what time of year it is, or even the types of events they're experiencing. Honestly, it's enough to make me want to bang my head against the wall sometimes. First of all, they aren't even skinwalkers. Skinwalkers probably don't even exist anymore, since the Navajo culture has dwindled significantly and, to my knowledge, there have been no Navajo shamans who have rejected their faith in recent years. It's possible there's one or two still around, but they're going to be low in number and in northeast Arizona and parts of New Mexico. They're desert dwellers and aren't even found in forests. The creatures that you're calling skinwalkers have never been given a proper name, but I've called them voice takers since I first encountered one when I was 12 or so. Back then, I lived with my parents in the forests of Northern California way off the beaten track. I mean, it was like an hour drive to the nearest town. It was that isolated. Our family had lived there for almost 40 years, so the creatures in the forest more or less left us alone until I got old enough to wander into the woods by myself. They were always curious about me, and more than once I had one knocking on my window in the early hours of the morning. But I don't count those as encounters because I was never in any real danger. The first time one properly got to me, I was 12 years old and out in the forest alone for the first time. It was my first year going to school instead of being homeschooled by my mother and I. Like most 12-year-olds, hated school. So I went into the forest to blow off some steam. It was getting dark already and was approaching sunset, which is important because voice takers, like most of the creatures in the forest, are nocturnal. I was walking along one of the trails, not paying attention to where I was going, when I heard someone call my name. They sounded just like my mother. So I called back, "Mom?" And of course, it called to me again. Let me just say that this voice taker was smart. In fact, it was the smartest voice taker that I've ever come across. Most of the time, they aren't much more intelligent than your average dog, which is why they usually imitate animals. That's just as effective as using a human voice. You would not believe the number of campers who will follow the sound of a dog barking in the forest for miles. Anyway, it was calling me from the direction of my house. So, of course, I turn around and start heading back towards the house and towards the voice taker. It's still calling me, and I'm yelling back every couple minutes. And then it says, "Alicia, I can hear you. Come over here." It sounded like my mother was terrified. I never saw my mother afraid before or after this incident, but I knew that she was then. This voice taker does fear and anxiety really well, by the way. Before I moved away from that house, I could pick it out of a crowd because it always sounds hurt. So I start panicking a little, not knowing why she was upset. I could tell that my mom was off the path, so I stepped off of it and kept following the sound of her voice, all the while telling her I was coming and to just wait for me. I get to where her voice is coming from, and it's coming from right behind this big tree. I walked around it, and the voice taker was there. One of the things you guys always get right is that voice takers don't want to be seen. They prefer to stay hidden until the very last second, and there is a damn good reason for that. They are ugly and awkward and won't pass for anything besides a voice taker when you lay eyes on them. This one was standing upright with its back against the tree, with its huge circular mouth hanging open, humpbacked with its shoulders at an awkward angle. One of its legs had been broken at some point, and it was standing awkwardly. It was scary as hell to hear my mother's voice echoing out of that gaping circular hole it called a mouth. "There you are, Alicia," it said. I tried to run away, obviously, but it grabbed me. It wasn't much larger than I was, and it was skeletal and weak-looking, but being grabbed by it felt like I was being held by an adult 3 times my size. It threw me to the ground and climbed on top of me. That mouth expanded vertically, and then the rest of its body did too, like it had a zipper from the top of its head all the way down to its belly button. Flesh peeled backwards and opened up, exposing the inside of its body. The bones went too, the ribs and skull flexing like they were made of rubber. It was hollow inside except for these pale sacs of flesh that hung pulsating from the inside of its rib cage and what looked like tonsils in its throat. I was trying to scream, but by then the weight of its body had pressed all the air out of my lungs. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest, and I couldn't move my arms or legs. Those pale organs inside of its rib cage started to grow and reach toward my face, and my adrenaline spiked so hard I felt my consciousness try to leave my body. It gave me a needed boost of clarity and awareness of my body. I managed to get my legs up against the voice taker and started kicking the inside of its torso, contorting my body to keep my face as far away from its organs as possible. After a couple seconds of that, it shifted to hold down my legs and I got my arm loose. To this day, I don't know why I thought it was a good idea, but I reached out and punched it in the tonsil. It screamed so loud and in so many different voices all at once that my senses almost couldn't handle it. It was like being blasted full volume with every action movie fight scene all at once. My ears started ringing, and I actually thought I had died for a moment. Then I realized I was still alive and I punched again, hitting the other voice sac this time. The same thing happened again, and the voice taker was finally stunned enough to loosen its hold on me a little bit. I kicked it off of me and got to my feet. I seized the nearest large stick and hit the thing in the head twice. Then its zipper started to close up again. Instead of leaving well enough alone, I grabbed whatever I could from the ground and stuffed it inside. Rocks, leaves, beetles, flowers, pine needles. It all went into that voice taker. I wasn't able to get much in there, but what I did manage was enough to make it retch and spill open again, its body literally turning inside out. While it was lying there writhing and flapping like a demonic manta ray, I stood up, still holding the stick I had used to beat it, which is when I noticed there were 3 more watching me from the tree line. At this point, it was almost fully dark, but I could make them out because my entire body was aware of their shape now, like how you instantly recognize a snake when you see one. I was dead terrified, but I was angry too at that point, and I knew they wouldn't just let me leave. So I screamed as loudly as I could, "What the do you want? I'll beat you all too." But none of them approached me, and after a few seconds, I backed away from all 4 of them. When none followed, I took my new stick and ran all the way back to the house. I was bleeding from the ears and temporarily deaf for about 10 minutes afterward, and sometimes I still hear ringing in my ears because of it. The voice takers never tried to lure me away ever again. I would tell you that I don't know why they all didn't pile onto me that night and kill me, but that would be a lie. I won't tell you why right now, though. If people ask, I might explain later, but for now, let's just say that there's a whole lot more than voice takers in most forests, and they're like coyotes or foxes in terms of the food chain, mostly feeding off scraps and remains other creatures leave behind. I learned later that their diet mostly consists of leaves and grass, that they only go after humans and other large animals during their breeding season, which begins in late summer and extends to mid-fall. The other thing that I learned later is why punching that voice taker in the tonsil. They collect sounds in the sacs in their throat. I don't know how, but they literally capture voices and release them back out. The voice taker that attacked me must have been hanging around the house for months or years, catching fragments of my mother's voice in order to catch me off guard. When I punched those sacs, I released all of the sounds that the voice taker had stored up. It was the equivalent of punching someone's breath out of them, but like I had actually managed to collapse its lungs. Now, obviously, I don't recommend dealing with voice takers this way, since you'll probably just be eaten by others even if you incapacitate one in this way. Instead, if you think you're being attacked by voice takers, set up speakers facing outwards from your house or campsite and play something with a whole bunch of voices in it. Sitcoms and comedy shows with ensemble casts are best, especially if they have a laugh track. The voice taker will be so preoccupied with collecting new voices and sounds that it will probably stop trying to attack you for that night. And then instead of hearing the voices of your friends or animals calling you from the woods, you get to hear snippets of dialogue from the office for a week or so. It's good fun, and a lot less difficult to explain away. Plus, you'll give the other creatures in the woods a laugh with it, which is always a good first impression. If voice takers are your biggest problem, you've gotten off easy. I should mention that some of the other creatures that stories here have lumped in under the title Skinwalker are different from the voice takers and are a whole lot more difficult to deal with. But I don't want to make this any longer than it already is, and I'm not convinced you'll take my advice even if I gave it. Thank you all for reading, and I hope you appreciate my advice and story. It's really helped me to type this out and get it off my chest. I never told anyone about what happened with the voice takers, not even my parents. Neither of them believed in their existence, and I never got the chance to prove it to them. Fifth story. That time I saw a skinwalker, a witch, and a werewolf. Late summer, 1986. We were driving through the Rocky Mountains on our way to Ouray. There were 3 of us, Steve, Danny, and me. We were young, dumb, and fed up with what life was really like after college. So we bought some matches, packed a cooler of beer, food, and beer, and loaded up my trusty Toyota with all the fixings for a classic camping trip. This trip was supposed to shake up the devastating monotony of our daily life, and shake us up it did, to the very core. Right before we were getting ready to set out, Steve's mom ran out of the house and told him he should take their newly adopted family dog, Luna, for safety. Steve was hesitant. He didn't want to have to look after the dog, especially if we were going to be drinking. And she was a big dog, a mixed husky and something else, Great Dane maybe. But his mom insisted until, finally, he broke and agreed to take her. Luna looked up at him with her warm blue eyes and seemed to smile. Steve sighed and said, "I guess I'll sit in the back with her." No, I said, walking over and patting her head. "Let her sit up front with me." She wagged her tail. Most of the car ride went smoothly, and we sang along to the radio, mooed at cows, and waved at, or flipped off, motorcyclists. But as we neared our destination, and the sun sank behind us, leaving us in a thick, almost tangible darkness, we started to become jumpy, pointing at strange shadows and swift movements. Luna, though, was curled up and asleep beside me, unaware of our growing fear. The sky was covered in big, roiling clouds that blew swiftly towards the east, covering and revealing the full moon at random intervals. By now we were the only vehicle on the road. My headlights barely sliced the darkness around us as we weaved our way through the mountains. The isolation, the darkness, the silence, it was all so crushing. "Steve, I thought you said we would be there before the sun set. I told you we shouldn't have stopped at that bar." Danny, I didn't know we'd be there for that long. You wouldn't stop your stupid pool game. And I won. Come on. It's not that dark out. Would some money make you happy? You asho. Hey, cool it. Look. What the hell is that? I slowed the car down to a stop, trying to see what was blocking the road, but the light from the cloud-covered moon was too dim. What the hell? Danny, I whispered as she rolled down her window. I was apprehensive, worried this was someone's attempt to rob us, or worse. I had heard all the urban legends before. I just want to see better. She stuck her head out of the window, and I rolled a little bit closer. Luna, feeling the change in the car's movement, lifted her head and sat up, panting. Oh shit, I think it's a dead deer. You guys gross. Danny retreated back inside the car and rolled the window back up. Who the hell just leaves something like that on the road? Assholes, Steve said, then leaned forward. Hey man, think you can drive around it? Yeah, I think I can. I approached the thing, now seeing the antlers and the gleaming black eyes, open, staring, dead. It blinked. I yelped and jerked the steering wheel, side-swiping the mountainside. Shit, what the hell, man? It's alive. What? That deer. It's alive. As I spoke, The deer lifted its head and bleated. The sound echoed around the chasm. We all jumped and watched as it pushed itself up, up until it was standing on its hind legs, like a man, but uncanny, grotesque. Mesmerized, we sat unable to move as the thing walked over to us, slowly, decidedly, as if walking on two legs was a thing this deer did often. It leaned down next to Danny's window, its face so close to the glass that steam from its nose fogged it up. A low noise rang out through the car. Luna was growling, her hackles raised, crouched in the seat next to me. Bang! The thing rammed its head into the window. Chaos erupted. Danny screamed, piercing, "Hi!" Luna started barking, booming, persistent. Steve yelled, telling me to go. Just go. I, shaking, struggled with the clutch, stalling. Bang! The window cracked and the thing started making an incredible sound. It sounded like a weird screeching, guttural form of laughter. Finally the clutch caught and I sped the hell out of there. I checked the rear view and saw the thing, standing on two legs, looking after us. Suddenly it leapt forward and began running after us. It ran on two legs instead of four, and it was fast, so fast. I drove as fast as I could on that winding mountain road, but, despite my speed, the thing still caught up with us. It tapped its antlers on my window and screeched that weird laughter again. Then it pointed in front of us, bared its teeth, and stopped. The abruptness of how quickly it disappeared caught me off guard. Watch out! I snapped forward and what I saw made me slam on my brakes. A house, in the middle of the road. I guess it was more of a cottage or a hut, but there it was, clear, vivid, in front of us. Danny was audibly crying in the back seat, repeating, "What the hell?" over and over to herself. Steve was breathing heavily, like he had just run a marathon. Luna was whimpering beside me and scratching at the window. Nausea enveloped me, made worse by the vibration from my pounding heart. Seriously, what is going on? I think I'm going to puke, man. Don't open that door. Just back up, turn around. Man, let's go back. Towards that thing? No way, man. Well, if you didn't notice, there's a goddamn house in front of me. Just drive through it, come on. No. Danny, calm down. It's okay. We're okay. We'll be okay. Danny simpered and started sobbing again. Shut up, Danny, please. Guys, look. Oh God. The house, it was spinning, slowly, and stopped when the front of it pointed directly at my car. The door to the house slammed open, emitting a sound like a gunshot. A single point of light emerged from the darkness inside the house. A candle, and holding it up was a figure, stooped over, covered in what looked like blackened rags. It began to approach us, lurching forward swift, then slow, then swift again. It was making this eerie deep staccato sound. Are you for real right now? Steve was leaning forward, peering out the windshield. Let's go. Reverse. That thing is behind us. Run it over. Look. Danny screamed. The stooped figure was now running at full speed straight at us. It slammed onto my hood, and we could finally see that it was an old woman, covered in wrinkles, completely bald, with sharpened yellow teeth. She was moaning and moaning. She crawled up the hood, opened her mouth, and licked the glass, leaving a trail of blood-colored saliva. Luna went wild, barking, foaming at the mouth, throwing herself at the door. Please. Back up now. I slammed my foot on the gas, but my tires made a sickening sound, and the smell of burnt rubber slipped into the car. It's behind us, It's behind us. I turned back to see the deer's head, teeth still bared, peering at me from the back window. What do we do? What do I do? Luna, no. With a final lunge, Luna forced the door open. It sounds shocking, but she was such a large dog and strong. A powerful wind picked up and the roiling clouds dissipating, allowing the light from the full moon to illuminate the scene in front and behind us. Luna was as still as a statue, slightly crouched, poised to leap. The hackles on her back quivered and a single thread of drool spun itself down from her mouth. She began to shake, faster and faster. It looked like she was having a seizure. The old woman and the dear thing were both looking over at her. Something strange was happening to Luna. It looked as if her limbs were breaking, elongating. Her snout narrowed, sinking closer to her face. She rose up onto her hind legs, humanoid, and howled up towards the sky before locking eyes with the hag on my car. In the blink of an eye, Luna was on the woman, ripping her away, shaking her to and fro in her jaw like a rag doll. Luna flung the woman towards the house, and she struck it with some force and didn't get back up. The house and the woman vanished in a puff of smoke. Luna turned towards the thing behind us. It screeched, raising itself up to its full height, challenging her. Luna howled again, then licked her fangs. The thing took 2 steps towards her, before turning tail and fleeing down the road, Luna giving chase. They both ran on 2 legs, instead of 4. We sat in total silence for a few moments, until I leaned over and slammed the passenger side door closed. I think Danny passed out. I turned to look at Steve. He looked at me. Let's get out of here, man. We got 2 miles before the thunk, thunk, thunk beneath us couldn't be ignored any longer. A flat tire. I pulled over and we eyed the darkness around us, paranoid. I'm not changing it. I'm not going out there, Steve said loudly. Don't worry, there's no spare. What? I took it out to make room for all the camping stuff. Are you kidding me? Nope. Well, what the hell do we do now? I sighed. I didn't know. Suddenly, like magic, like a miracle, headlights appeared behind us. A godsend, a car. I hope they're normal. Me too. Should we tell them? We locked eyes again. No. If they bring it up, maybe. If it's a cop, definitely not. He'll think we're high. The car rolled up beside us. It was totally black with tinted windows. The window rolled down and behind it sat a middle-aged man. He looked tired, maybe sad. Need some help? Oh, thank God, Steve whispered. Yes, flat tire. Don't have a spare. Well, that's dumb, the man said. You should always carry a spare, always. Never know what could happen. Lucky for you. I think I have one that will fit your car. You joking? The man shook his head and hopped out of his car. He was dressed sharply. Black suit, black tie, black shoes, all covered by a trench coat. Come on. You can hold the flashlight for me. I hesitated, then exited the car. What happened here? He pointed to the window next to Danny's head. Oh, it's been like that for a while. Dumb neighbor kid hit it with a baseball. The man nodded. And her? Tired, just tired. We've been driving for a while. Driving where? Ouray. For camping. Nice place. We've heard. Say, the man said, releasing the jack. Job done. Seen anything weird tonight? My heart sped up, and I looked around us half expecting the deer, or the woman, or Luna to come sprinting towards us. What do you mean weird? Oh, I dunno. Anything out of the ordinary. No, why? Oh, no reason. Just heard some spooky tales. Tales? That the natives who used to live around here would tell. What tales? The man stood up and dusted his hands off on his coat. Well, he said, ignoring my question, you're all set. You're about 20 minutes out from Ouray, and 2 hours from the sunrise. I'd advise you get a move on. Never know what might be stalking you out there. I'm headed the same way, actually. I can drive behind you if you like. A muffled yes came from inside the car, and we both looked up to see Steve nodding voraciously. Yeah, that would be great, actually. The corners of the man's mouth twitched a bit as he nodded, sliding back into his car. We drove to Ouray without incident and, as soon as we hit the city, the man in the car behind us flashed his brights twice, then flipped a U-turn, speeding back down the way we came. I thought he said he was going this way, I said, looking in my rear view. Who cares? Let's get a hotel room and leave first thing tomorrow morning, Danny said. She had woken up as we were driving towards Ouray. We filled her in on the strange man and how he helped us, but she was still spooked and jumpy. And we did just that. We didn't dare camp in the wilderness, or even leave the relative safety of the town. On the way back to civilization, we swore to never tell anyone what happened. It was too weird, uncanny, horrifying. Steve was silent, afraid of what his mom might say or do about Luna. We made up some story about how she had fallen over a cliff after chasing a deer. Poor Luna. We did stop for an hour, around the area it happened, and called out to her, but to no avail. We never saw her again. It's been years since this happened and I'm old now. The three of us lost touch after we returned from the trip, but vowed to keep this secret to our death. Last I heard, Steve died from a heart attack and Danny was diagnosed with stomach cancer. I figured it's about time I shared my tale. Maybe it'll help me make some semblance of sense out of it. In the end, though, I don't know if those things were protecting us from her, or if she was protecting us from them. I guess I'll never know. Sometimes, late at night, when I hear howling, I like to imagine it's Luna, out there, somewhere, running free in the wild. 6th story. Skinwalkers. I always thought that the legends about skinwalkers were just that, legends. Tales to scare children around campfires, to keep them from wandering too far into the wilderness. But then I came face to face with one, and I realized that they were all too real. It happened when I was out camping in the middle of nowhere, far away from civilization. I had always loved the wilderness, the feeling of being completely cut off from the world. But that night, something felt off. The air was thick and oppressive, and I could hear strange noises coming from the darkness. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself that it was just my imagination, that I was being paranoid. But as the night wore on, the noises grew louder and more persistent. It sounded like something was scratching at the walls of my tent, trying to get in. I tried to convince myself that it was just an animal, but I knew deep down that it was something far more sinister. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the scratching stopped. The air grew still and quiet, and I felt a sense of dread settle over me. That's when I heard the whispering. It was a low, guttural sound, like nothing I had ever heard before. It was coming from just outside my tent, and it seemed to be growing louder and more insistent by the second. I wanted to run, to flee into the safety of my car and drive far away from this place. But something held me back, some morbid curiosity that made me want to know what was out there. And then it happened. The tent shook violently, as if something was trying to tear it apart from the outside. I could hear the fabric tearing, and I knew that I was in mortal danger. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The air grew still and quiet once again, and I was left sitting in my tent, alone with my thoughts. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat there, waiting for the sun to rise, listening to the whispers that seemed to echo in my head. And when the dawn finally broke, I knew that I had to get out of there. I packed up my things and got in my car, driving as fast as I could away from that cursed place. And as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me, something that had latched onto me like a parasite. I don't know if I'll ever go back to that wilderness again. The memory of that night still haunts me, and I know that there are things out there that we can't explain or understand. Skinwalkers are real, and they're not just legends. There's something far more terrifying, something that can shatter our understanding of the world around us. And I fear that they're still out there, waiting in the darkness for their next victim. Seventh story. There's a skinwalker lurking in the Jemez Mountains of New Mexico. I am a former resident of Albuquerque, New Mexico. I love it here. We have jaw-dropping sunsets along with our world-famous question, red or green? But there was one specific occurrence that makes me sick to my stomach that happened to have taken place only 2 hours from my humble city. It was early 2015. My father and my sister and I all decided to go camping in the Jemez Mountains one last time before school started. We own a camper, and we use it every time we go camping. So we hit the road in the early afternoon, and we arrived at the campsite in the late afternoon. We have a great spot that is about a quarter-mile off from the campgrounds. There's at least 1 or 2 people camping within a mile radius from our spot, so it's always nice and quiet. For some context, our spot is cornered by 2 semi-hills, and then there's a trail that leads to the main road. Father has told me that cattle and wildlife pass along that dense trail at night. Just another pro to camping in the Jemez. The sun started to set, so we made a campfire just behind the trail. After about 4 s'mores, me and my sister decide to hit the hay. My dad, being a firefighter, knows that you should never leave a campfire unattended, so he decides to stay out just a little bit longer before putting it out. It's around 9 p.m. and I'm falling asleep, until suddenly I heard my father scream from outside. I was then relieved when he chuckled and started to curse. He then came inside and told us what all the commotion was about. He said while he was watching the fire, he felt breathing on his neck. He almost pissed himself, he said. He thought there was a bear behind him. He then slowly looked behind him only to see a moose. He cursed and laughed because a damn moose made him scream. We all started laughing and pushed the event aside. I woke up about an hour later to the bright glow of flames. Oh shit, Father didn't put out the fire, I thought to myself. I opened the blinds only to see 2 bright as hell eyes peering from the trail. They looked like a dog's eyes when you shine a flashlight on them, but only 10x brighter. I let out a curse and fell back to sleep. It was too late for that shit. I woke up the next day to the smell of bacon and eggs. I was still wondering about what my father said the night before. Something just seemed really off about it. Then I realized what was so off about what my father said. It hit me like a brick. I spoke with a stuttered dad. Moose don't live in New Mexico. He looked at me with a confused look, and then his face went stone cold. Tell your sister we're leaving in an hour. Pack all of your stuff up. We left about 45 minutes later. I knew my dad is a skeptic. He believes in that everything is connected, kind of spirituality. Whenever we talk about ghosts or scary stories, he always says something along the lines of, someone could have easily made that up. But the way he reacted to his realization of seeing a moose in New Mexico validated that he wasn't looking for a logical explanation. He wanted to get the hell out of there to protect us. I couldn't relate this experience to other scary stories until I heard of the so-called skinwalkers. I can confirm that what my dad saw that night was a skinwalker. It checked out in every category of what they look like and how they behave. The eyes of a skinwalker are brighter than LED lights. They can take the form of a coyote, deer, sheep, human, you name it. Now, of course, the logical explanation was that he saw an elk, not a moose. But when I pushed my dad to tell about what he saw, he swears to God that he saw a moose, because moose have elongated snouts that most elks lack. I needed to get this weight off of my chest, so if anybody can relate or develop a logical explanation for what me and my father saw, I am open to what you guys have to offer. And yes, we have gone back almost 7 times for the past 2 years, and we never saw it again. 8th story. I think my neighbor's cat warded off a skinwalker. My father died about 5 years ago unexpectedly from a heart attack. To say it was hard on my mother, and I was an understatement. Our old house in Knoxville just didn't feel like home anymore. About a year later, Mom and I made plans to take ourselves and our elderly dog Ace on a move further south to a small town situated about a half hour from Atlanta. Just a few days before we were slated to move, however, I had one of the most vivid dreams I've ever come to experience. All that was within my dream was my bedroom. A picture-perfect recreation of the real thing. I sometimes wonder if I was in some sort of sleep paralysis state when it occurred. To further add to the dream's realism, in the middle of the night the streetlights right across the street would illuminate through my window, creating a light reflection on the wall perpendicular. In my dream, as I lay there staring at that exact reflection on the wall, I saw an orb of smoke fade in from the shadows. Goosebumps chilled across my skin. As I lay there panicked and afraid to move a muscle, suddenly, it stopped moving and steadily hung in the light's reflection, as if it was staring at me. Without warning, it spoke to me, in my dead father's voice. "I'm sending something to watch you." Despite hearing my father's voice come from the orb, I was terrified of it. I didn't know why, and yet, I managed to squeak out a small reply towards it. "What?" I whispered. The orb remained silent for a few moments, leaving an eerily dead silence in the voice's place. Just as quickly, it spoke to me one final time. "Damn, Black." I woke up almost instantaneously, gasping for breath. The nightmare had chilled me to my core. I didn't know exactly what to make of it, especially those 2 final words. I chalked it up to maybe Dad wishing us well on our move, but at the time, I couldn't shake the feeling it was some kind of warning. Within the next couple weeks, my mother and I moved out of Knoxville and headed down south to Georgia. She had managed to find a quaint little house for us. With only 1 or 2 neighbors down a gravel road in the middle of the woods, it was a nice fit for us. Probably the best reliever of all the stress that came with the move, however, was our new neighbor's cat. She was a petite, older black cat that gravitated towards me almost instantly, and I treated her as if she was my own pet. I left out a can of food once or twice a week for her, and even if I didn't call out for her, when she saw me outside, she would always run up to me. She helped ease my tensions about leaving Knoxville behind, especially without Dad there with us. Less than a month into our new house, I awoke suddenly to a faint coughing noise that sounded like it was coming from downstairs. One important thing to know about our dog Ace is that he has a collapsed trachea. He needs medicine to help calm the condition down. So I'm used to waking up in the middle of the night to give him his medicine. I proceeded downstairs from my bedroom to give him his cough medicine, but I couldn't find him anywhere throughout the house. He wasn't in his bed sleeping. He wasn't in the kitchen. He was nowhere to be found. I didn't check Mom's bedroom, however, as to avoid waking her up. Besides, I wouldn't have heard the coughing if he had been in there anyway, so I just let it be. That's when I heard the cough again, but it was coming from further away, as if from outside. I looked over at the side patio door leading out into the woodlands and realized I had forgotten to shut it. There it stood, slightly ajar. "Shit," I thought to myself. He got out. I immediately ran outside with a flashlight and started calling out for my dog. Ace! Ace! I shouted into the neighboring trees. I heard another cough and shined my light in its direction. That time, it had echoed from down the gravel road. I swear, a path had never looked so terrifyingly desolate before in my life than that night, as I stared down the same gravel road that had led us to our new home. But in that moment, I thought my dog was lost, and I chalked it up to new house jitters, so I pressed onward. Ace, come on, boy. Home's this way, buddy. That's when I heard it, the cough that I had been following, almost right beside me. But this time, it didn't stay like the dry cough I had been hearing. Instead, the cough had slowly descended into a low growl. I shined my light towards the new sound. There stood a bright red fox in the middle of the path. For a moment, I figured it was some kind of sick fox I had mistaken for my dog. The whole time, as I was processing what I was seeing, it stared directly at me. Its eyes glowed from the light of my flashlight. However, our stare broke when it tilted its head to the right. I looked down, and there she was, our neighbor's little black cat standing beside me. However, it was as if she had completely changed persona. She was no longer the happy, affectionate cat I had come to know. Instead, she had her back arched upright, every fiber of hair standing at attention, and uttered the lowest growl I had ever heard come out of a feline. In that moment, I figured she was just scared of the fox, so I knelt down beside her in a bid to coax her away and avoid the fox hurting her. But no matter how many times I tried to coax her out of fight mode, she wouldn't budge. Her stare remained unfazed. That's when I looked towards the direction of the fox once more, but there wasn't a fox standing there anymore. Instead, in the exact same spot of that gravel road, was a walking, rotting corpse of a roadkill coyote, slowly moving towards me. I took a step back, absolutely horrified of what I was seeing. Its jaw was hanging loose from its face, one of its eyes was stained with blood, and it wobbled back and forth as if it was desperately fighting pain. I rubbed my eyes out of disbelief, hoping I was imagining it, but it was still there when my eyes reopened. Despite the gruesome sight before us, our neighbor's black cat, no matter how tiny she was, stood there and kept growling at the creature. Suddenly, it stopped. The creature had ceased its walk towards us. For a moment, it just stood there, glancing back and forth between myself and this little black cat that was trying to defend me. That's when I unmistakably heard this beast mutter two solemn words, in a low, gravelly voice. Damn, Black. In a flash, the creature ran straight into the woods. I shined my flashlight in its direction, but it had completely vanished. Even the brush it had ran through looked untouched. That's when the cat, still standing beside me, calmed herself down. Almost as if nothing had happened, she rubbed herself up against my leg, returning to her normal, loving mood. Despite technically not being mine, I proceeded to scoop her up and run back into the house. Before heading upstairs with the little black cat snuggled up in my arms, I decided to poke my head into my mother's room. Laying on the floor, sound asleep, was Ace. He had been there the entire time. I quietly closed her door before bolting upstairs. I made sure that little cat slept with me in my bed that night. From the research I've done, I think I was almost the victim of some kind of skinwalker. It must have picked up the sounds my dog sometimes makes late at night, knowing I'd likely come to his aid. For whatever reason, our neighbor's black cat had scared it so badly, it scrambled away. I haven't seen it since that night, maybe because that same cat still likes to wander down the gravel road late at night, or maybe that thing just decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Either way, Whether I have my father or pure luck to thank, I leave a can of food out every single night for that little black cat. And the most ironic part of it all? That cat's name is Halloween.